Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Liz. I am a medical technologist and pharmaceutical chemist with over 30 years of experience in the health sector and pharmaceutical medical device industry. Today I want to do a reaction video to a clip that involves Jordan Peterson and Ben Bikman. Now I want to comment on this from the perspective of a carnivore. I am a carnivore, which means I only eat animal products, and I have been that way since November of 2022. So the reason I'm interested in looking at this video is because they hit on so many really just huge topics in a 10-minute period. It is the best, I guess, quick gut punch to the food, big ag, big pharma kind of industry. And the two people involved here are Jordan Peterson, who most of you probably know from, he's a psychologist. He became famous, I think, around 2015 or something like that, 2015, 2016 maybe. And Ben Bikman, who is a PhD and I believe bioenergetics. I'll put everything in the description below. But these two guys coming together to talk about the food industry is some major information that you're not going to want to miss. So why don't we get into it here on the Carnivore Science channel. So the title of this video is Why the Modern Diet is Making You Sick. It is a smaller clip of a larger video. So why don't we just let her rip?
So let's talk about lifestyle modification.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about government subsidy, let's say, and the food pyramid, the original food pyramid, and how it was developed. Because there's a story that'll curl your hair. Oh, it's so appalling.
Oh, it's vile.
It's so appalling. It's just, you can't read that without, what would you say? It's like a traumatic loss of naivety to believe that something that catastrophic could have been consciously perpetrated, yet it was.
It was.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
So the first point that Jordan Peterson makes here, he's talking about the food pyramid that is put out by the government that was published, and I don't have the date. I have so many dates in my head of all these different acts and these different bills that are passed that are god-awful when it comes to food, or these new revolutions in food. So I think it was in the 70s that they came up with the food pyramid, but somewhere around in there. And he's talking about why that actually came into place. It is not what you think. And, like Reagan said, I think I can't remember how many words, but the scariest phrase to ever hear is, I'm the government and I'm here to help you. Yeah, not a thing, man. So he's talking about how all the politics and all of the greed and the industry played into the creation of that. And there was a lot of like no science, pseudoscience and no science involved in that. So it's very cool that these two people are having a conversation about that and they're accepting it as fact. Because what I've noticed in polite society is that a lot of people really still believe that is the way to eat. And it was altered. I will be doing a video on the history of the food pyramid and its revisions pretty soon, so tune in for that.
Okay, so lifestyle change. So we think of the typical supermarket, okay?
Yes.
Now, people have often been counseled to eat around the edges, right? Don't go in the middle of the supermarket. Why? Because that's where all the processed food is. Well, is the problem processing? I don't think the problem is processing. The problem is all processed foods are emergency, hypercaloric, glucose-centric foods. Right, so they should be, they're like when you come across a beehive. They're not to eat every day. So you you go around the edges and you eat. Well, and you tell me if you disagree with any of this, because we want to make it simple for people, right? So you stay away from the processed foods because they're too high in concentrated carbohydrate and sugar.
Yes.
Fundamentally. Now, there may be other reasons to avoid them as well.
Yeah.
The chemicals that are in them, the fact that they've been designed to be addictive, etc.
Oh, yes.
But to me, that's trivial compared to the fact that, no, mostly they're just the equivalent of sugar.
Yep.
Okay, now you grade.
Notice what he said about the chemicals in the food is that it seems to be like it's a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as the fact that everything in the middle of the grocery store is super concentrated carbohydrates, just mega sugar and everything. And that's the truth. Like if you go through, you're going to be hard pressed to find anything that's not going to be that way in the middle of the grocery store or the center of the grocery store. I say that all the time when I talk to new carnivores or people trying keto. It's like, stay on the perimeter, you know, even on the perimeter. There's a lot of stuff you wouldn't want to touch there too, because they're dumping sugar into yogurts and things that were normally okay. They're mutilating with a bunch of sugar and excess carbohydrates and chemicals. But I think this is interesting that he actually is focusing on the fact that the chemicals, still a problem, are almost not as big of a problem as the mega carbohydrate load.
Graze around the edges. That means the kinds of vegetables you don't really like, right?
Yeah.
Dairy, including butter, including yogurt, all of that.
Yes.
So that's food that people actually like.
Yeah.
Not sweetened yogurt, no sugar. Stay away from the damn sugar.
Yeah.
Meat. And that's about that, fundamentally. Right.
Yes.
And definitely don't drink soft drinks.
No, it's absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you don't want your food to come from, the less you are able to formulate a diet where your food isn't coming from bags and boxes with barcodes, the better off you're going to be. And the way you just described it, you've done it. Yeah. To me, I mean, first and foremost, we have more in common with a wolf, digestively speaking, than we do our closest animal relative like chimpanzees or apes or any other primate. If you look at the digestive system of
Chimps
the human,
spend 8 hours a day chewing.
Yeah, they have to
that's a
eat
hell of a
constantly
life.
because it is such a nutrient deficient diet. Their colon, their large intestine, is substantially bigger than the humans because they have to ferment so much. Moreover,
And brain comparatively smaller.
very small brain, very big intestines.
Yes.
And
that's
even
the
still,
vegan evolutionary pathway,
yes.
by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and you want to shrink your brain, remove animal-sourced foods from it, and you'll be like your other primate cousins and start to shrink your brain. But unfortunately, you don't have the colon to ferment as much as they do. Moreover, you're probably not prepared to eat your own feces, which is what they'll do to get vitamin B12. A purely plant-based diet is so deficient in nutrients, it is utterly incompatible with the human survival.
Okay, so this is the best thing. I mean, the best analogy is that, you know, we have more in common with a wolf as far as what we eat than we do apes, because everybody wants to bring up primates. Oh, we're like primates. We're like primates. When actually digestively, we couldn't be more different, to be honest. So that's very interesting, especially the part, in order to get enough B12, I believe it is the thing that's missing. The apes have to eat their own crap. Yeah, that's nasty. That's gross. And the fact that they have a fermenter digestive system, we do not have that. So all of this fiber and all of this stuff, all these vegetables you're cramming down your gullet, they're not doing you any favors. So, and most of the vitamins are not bioavailable. In a lot of cases, it's not bioavailable. So that's a brilliant comparison, is that we're more like wolves than we are primates.
Let alone human reproduction. I consider it, in fact, I feel so strongly about this that I actually consider it to be quite devilish or overtly satanic, that I think of, if you'll allow me to invoke some scripture, we often talk about Christ's great commandments, love God, love your neighbor. And yet there was a commandment that preceded those, which was God's commandment to Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply and replenish the earth. That was the first commandment. And the older I'm getting, as both a man of religion and of science, I sort of use that commandment as my litmus test. If this is an ideology or a principle or a practice that is going to make it harder for people to reproduce,
there's something fundamentally
then there's
wrong
something
with it.
wrong with it, and I must reject it. And so even when it comes to diet,
reproductive capacity is species health across generations, right? It's the equivalent of health,
Yes.
except across generations.
Yes.
So I love that a discussion, because I mean, think about it. If whatever that you're doing, whatever your lifestyle is that you're doing impacts your reproductive ability negatively, it's bad, because that is, like he said, be fruitful and multiply. That was the first commandment. He is absolutely right about that. And if you think about it, even if you don't look at it from a spiritual perspective, just from a life perspective, life is to bring more life into the world. And if something keeps you from doing that, it's harming you. It's not a good thing. So I like that. I think that was a very, very insightful thing to say from Benjamin Bikman.
Obviously, anything that's anti-reproduction in its essence is there isn't anything more pathological.
Yeah, whether you invoke God, whether the commandment to Adam and Eve, or whether you invoke evolution, whose great design is to just have an advantage to reproduce, you all come back to reproduction.
See, one of the things I'm seeing on the Maha side is that it's difficult to bring unity to the field of preventative medicine. I mean, many people are concentrating on the panoply of chemicals that are in like Fruit Loops, and fair enough. Fair enough. But for me, the problem with a Fruit Loop is that it's basically just a sugar lump.
Oh, you and I are totally aligned on this. That you have to manage your macros. All the other micro stuff, that matters a little. But if your macronutrients aren't aligned, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and I have rules for each of them, then all that other stuff is fluff.
Yeah, it's noise, essentially.
It's noise.
Yeah,
It'll move the needle a little, but not enough to do anything.
Well, and then the thing is, if you're only able to fight one battle at a time, you better fight the right battle.
That's right.
And it seems to me now, it's also the case that there's no recommended daily allowance for carbohydrates.
Yeah, oddly enough.
So, I know, that's very odd. So expand on what that means.
It's actually not odd, because it is not essential. Never has been, never will be. So it's not odd. Just saying.
Odd for multiple reasons, including I consider it the most pathogenic because of everything we've been describing. But it's also the one that is utterly unessential. You appreciate this, but most people don't. Even within the United States, the Department of Agriculture years ago had a statement where it says something like, I'm going to loosely quote it, the lower limit of dietary carbohydrates is 0.
Right. 0's a low limit.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty low number.
That's for sure.
And yet, that's the one you tell me to eat the most of, born from the food guide pyramid in its ill-fated ideology, or born from the modern obsession, sort of a pseudo-religious view that we can't kill anything. And what a naive view. Life is death. Everything that is alive benefits because something died before it, and we benefit from all of that stuff. So we have this kind of perverse, shifted view of nutrition, where we focus on carbohydrates, the one thing we literally don't need to eat it. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, and yet
Amen to that. There is not an essential carbohydrate. Absolutely.
70% of all calories globally come from carbohydrates. So
they do have the advantage of being cheap in the short run.
Yeah.
And
especially if it's subsidized, it's cheap.
Yeah, well,
for the person
that's
who's
a separate issue. Because you could imagine.
That is a separate issue. And when you look at the food pyramid, subsidies, government subsidies, and the agricultural industry and the USDA, we'll talk about that in another video. It's very interesting, though.
Humanity's been solving a sequence of problems. And one problem, and it was real, was there just wasn't enough calories. Okay, so you probably want to address that so people don't starve. And fair enough. And maybe you can address that more cheaply with corn than with beef. Okay, and so we've given the devil his due, but that doesn't mean that constitutes an optimized diet. And that's where I think the people who created the food pyramid were criminal. Criminal.
Yeah.
Because the story, and this is a story you're fleshing out, is that the base of the pyramid, so that's where you get the bulk of your calories, according to the hypothetically scientific guidelines of the government, which were never scientific in the least, right from the beginning, is that's where you should.
And this is true too, as has been coming out in years since, that they did not. There was a lot of corruption as to what goes on that pyramid, how much, a lot of corruption. When you look at the sugar industry and the research done in the sugar industry versus, animal fats, that was completely corrupted too. So it's a really deep rabbit hole to go down into.
Should derive the bulk of your calories.
Yes.
And then fats and meat are a tiny element of that.
Yeah, no,
and that's they knew from what I've seen in my investigations is that the people who designed that bloody pyramid were told by their own scientists that they were going to produce an epidemic of obesity and diabetes.
Yeah, Dr. Philip Handler was the president of one of the leading scientific societies in the United States at the time. And I'm going to loosely quote him, but he says, what right has the federal government to conduct such a grand experiment with the population of the United States as its test subjects? Yeah. That it had never been done.
With no control.
No, that's right. It had never been done.
And no consent.
And look at what's happened. People want to blame meat for all what ails us, which talk about an insane ideology. But you look at red meat consumption from the early 1900s till now, it's been a steady decline. And yet what's happened to heart disease, even at the superficial 30,000-foot view, blaming meat for the ills of these diseases of civilization, these plagues of prosperity, it makes no sense.
Well, now we've got the bloody Greens who are doing the same thing. And, the globalist utopian vision. Yes. This is the C40 vision. This is a consortium of municipalities all around the world, including many of the world's biggest cities. They want a 95% reduction in meat consumption. That's not all. 95% reduction in private automobile ownership.
Oh, yes, of course.
One short-haul flight per person every 3 years.
Oh, my.
3 items of clothing per year.
That sounds like a perfect way to enslave people.
Oh, it's just...
You seeing a trend on the anti-meat line? It's kind of funny. It's all packaged in there with the anti-everything else, or the you'll own nothing and you'll be happy type of thing. So it's just an interesting rabbit hole to go down if you look at how these things are packaged together, because it is a very naive view that nothing ever dies, and that I understand people who care about animals and they hate the carnivore lifestyle because of that, because I like animals too, but this is nature. This is not something that we made or that we can control in that way. So, it's just something, it's just a part of life. It's this, what does they call it? Circle of life. So, not to quote the Lion King or anything.
Just beyond comprehension. But the meat element is particularly egregious as far as I'm concerned, because there are forms of agriculture that are meat intensive, that revivify soil, and the idea that that's contributing to something like a climate catastrophe, that I can't imagine a stupider lie than that one. Although there are some.
It is tragic because, for multiple reasons. Just as a fun aside, when studies in men have shown that if man stops eating meat, saturated fats in particular, his testosterone plummets, his sperm production plummets. Like, this is antithetical to human production.
Wouldn't you think that that's an evolution, that's a biological sign of scarcity?
Yes, that's right.
Well, it's no bloody wonder that you
don't reproduce.
Don't reproduce now, because all you have to eat is broccoli.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I really, that is a really, really good perspective. Those are 2 good perspectives packed into a very short amount of time. So I wanted to share that with everybody. And just in case you don't know, Jordan Peterson, he's a carnivore. He had more medical conditions than he knew what to do with. Depression, anxiety. He had other issues, digestive issues. His daughter, Michaela Peterson, she had to have had her hip replaced, I believe, I think at 14. Major, major issues. And they both went carnivore and solved their medical problems. So did I in 2022. I had a laundry list of things that were wrong with me. I was literally falling apart. And in November of 2022, I started the carnivore diet, and I started seeing relief in 3 days. And a lot of other stuff started to fall into line weeks and months afterwards. And I've never looked back. It's an amazing diet with amazing results, and it is the way that we are supposed to eat. It is the proper human diet. So I hope you've enjoyed this clip, and if you guys want to put some comments down in below and let me know what you think of it, that'd be great. And if you want to like the video, If you like it, and if you want to, you can subscribe, and I will be seeing you guys in the next video. Bye.